Everybody has to have one of these pages. It's a summary of the content today. This was mandated by a federal court judge, so I have to cover all of this stuff. It was all covered in the Kirk T training that you got when you were first hired, so we're going to compress that 12-hour or 15-hour ordeal. So that's the first thing. You have to make sure you sign that and put the date, today's date, and the start and stop time. For those of you who arrived at 10, you're going to write 10 o'clock as the start time. If you arrived later, you're going to write 10:30, 10:15, whatever time you actually arrived. But by federal court order, I have to show that you had 6 hours of training. So you'll stay a little later, we'll watch the beginning of it, we'll play it back, and you'll be able to get credit for the full 6 hours. If you started 15 minutes late, you'll end 15 minutes later, but like everything else we do, we're going to tell the truth. In your packet, there is a list of BSC contact information. It's got name, email address, cell phone number. Please make sure you make use of that. If you need a supervisor, any of the people on this list could step in and do supervision for you on the phone if necessary. So we want to be sure that you always get the supervision that you need in order to do your work, and we'll talk more thoroughly about that in a minute. We have a paper in here called TSS Phone Clinical and Group Supervision Documentation. This is the page you want to make sure you fill out when you are getting phone, group, or other kinds of supervision other than when you're actually working with a child. When you're actually working with a child, we call that in vivo or consultative supervision. It means you get paid for working as a TSS. At the end of your work time, all you have to do is sign off on the BSC progress note, and poof, that turns it into a supervision record. So that's how you get credit for supervision while you're working. If you don't get supervision in a given week, theoretically, you're not eligible to be paid for or deliver any services in the following week. We can apply supervision records from one week to another to cover gaps, and that's one of the biggest reasons we have the group supervision mandate, because we can use that to make sure that you're covered for supervision no matter what. All right, and this is the form you'd fill out for group supervision. Also in your packet, there is a quiz. I want you to fill out the quiz as you're learning stuff. It's important for me to have a record that you received the training, document as we go along. Also in the packet, you have a couple of progress note examples. I'm going to show you other examples up on the visuals there. In Philadelphia, we have a 2-page progress note. In Delaware, Montgomery, and Bucks County, it's a 3-page progress note. Page 1 is the same. Page 2 in Philadelphia is a narrative. The narrative doesn't exist in Bucks, Delaware, or Montgomery County. Instead of the narrative, we have a 2-page sequence. One records the antecedents and then the caregiver's involvement in treatment, and the third one where you circle the interventions that you used. So we'll go over examples, pristine, perfect examples of those 2 different kinds of treatment plans, and then we'll have a short conversation about the contact record form. And I mean, it's pretty self-obvious that when you fill out a contact record form, you're literally telling the billing people, hey, bill for this exactly and pay me for this. So if you write it at 4 that looks like a 9 or a 7 or some other character, it's a crapshoot whether you get paid. I tell the staff all the time that if you're not certain what the number is, call them. Their phone number's right there. Make sure you get the number right so we don't bill incorrectly and they get paid on time and nobody takes any money back. Make sure when you write a number, it looks like that number and no other number. It's really important that you're clear on the contact record form and that the contact record form exactly matches the progress notes that are attached to it. You just have to make sure. That's a basic standard of fiscal integrity, and if we blow that, there's no point in operating a business. We're just, we're guessing. Up on the screen you see the seal for the Institute for Behavior Change. You can see that we were formed in 1997. You may be aware that some places say that any business that's in operation for more than 5 years is in the top 5% of businesses. That's actually true. 95% of all businesses go out of business within 5 years. Well, we've made it for 20, and businesses that have been in existence for that long have a tendency to stay on forever. So we're just like Coca-Cola. Now, maybe not. Interestingly enough, though, the Affordable Care Act treats the Institute just like Coca-Cola or IBM or another what they call large entity. So we are in fact a large entity as far as the Affordable Care Act goes, and that means we have obligations to meet that are the same obligations that IBM or Microsoft or these other enormous multinational corporations have. It's a little bit unfair for a company of our size to be considered a large entity, because it makes it necessary that we have to offer health insurance to everybody, and it's very difficult to make those ends meet when you're dealing with a system that has not given a cost of living increase. The amount that we're able to bill for now is virtually identical to what we were able to bill in 1997. So I've adjusted the pay rates up over the years, and through that means just diminished the margin that I have left to live on over the years to it's about 3 or 4% of our gross revenue. So what that means from an economic perspective is the Institute is giving as much back to the employees as it possibly can. And when we talk about some of the benefits that the Institute is providing you, you have to understand that I'm stretching it to the absolute limit that I possibly can. And as a result, I can't do things like offer paid time off. We used to do that. We almost went broke doing it. Our pay rates are adjusted to afford what we can afford to pay, and our standard is you're entitled to be paid after the Institute gets paid. That's a term in our contract that's been there for 20 years, and it literally has enabled us to stay in business when insurance companies have slowed down their payments to us, which did happen at one point. I want to invite all of you and appeal to all of you to talk to your friends. We need more people on all levels. One of the school districts in the Southeastern District of Pennsylvania has communicated with us and said, we want your company, your staff, to be the only ones who our children are referred to for behavioral support. The only ones. That is a colossal honor, and it's something I'd like to respond to, obviously. We created an organization called the Children's Behavioral Health Center that would allow us to grow infinitely large without adding other psychologists. The CBHC can grow as large as the client base. It can only treat children with autism spectrum disorders. So what we will be doing over the next few months or maybe a year, we're going to be moving the kids who get treatment through the network but who have autism spectrum disorders, we're going to move them into the Children's Behavioral Health Center. So that by that means we will expand the size of the organization and hopefully generate resources and revenue that will enable it to sustain itself. And the Network for Behavior Change will gradually shift toward focusing on kids with ADHD and other kinds of disabilities and perhaps shorter-term needs for treatment. So the short version is we have this enormous potential for growth. So if you'll talk to your friends who are in the field and with degrees in psychology or education, bachelor's degrees, who would like to do TSS work, we have an urgent need to add more staff for the work that we could do through this Southeastern School District, Southeastern region. There's about 1,000 children, and we could be the only provider of services to all of them. Right now we have about 100 kids that we work with, So we could literally experience a tenfold increase in the reach that we have into kids' lives. If you have done something that you really know you ought not to have done, like billed for services that weren't rendered, inflated your hours, said you worked 2 hours when you really only worked 1, etc., etc. If you've done anything like that anywhere, it's a mistake. You can correct the record without a severe penalty if you admit the mistake and pay the money back. If you get caught making that mistake and have not paid the money back, it's a very big deal, and they can charge 3 times what you were paid as a penalty. You can also lose your ability to ever work in a Medicaid-funded system, and that is the education system, the Medicaid system for mental health. In other words, it can be a career ender if you do that. We're going to talk about that in the compliance plan. So the reason I'm introducing it as an introduction, that's how serious it is that we do this work. There are forces aligned to hurt us as providers and to take services away from children. They are the enemy. We don't have many friends in government because government created insurance companies to take limited resources and spread them a mile wide and an inch deep, because that's what certificates of excellence are given out for. That's what plaques go up in politician offices for. So the bottom line is you've got this system that is set up to do everything except help children with disabilities. What happens when you drive a tack with a toothpick? You break a lot of toothpicks and you prove that the tack isn't responding. So you discard the toothpick program, and you've proven that you've done as much as you can for this kid with a disability and 10,000 just like him by giving him toothpick level treatment. That's a certificate of excellence. What we actually do is give the kids what they need. They get 25 hours or more of intensive individualized treatment every week if that's what they need. Other places are not doing that. The standard in the state of Pennsylvania now is 6 hours of TSS a week for kids. That's it. 25 is the minimum set by the National Academy of Sciences and the American Academy of Pediatrics. Those are standards. Those are national standards. They've been repeated 3 times. 2001, 2007, 2012. You're part of a mission to actually help children, to do something meaningful in their lives, not driving a tack with a sledgehammer, but certainly not driving it with a toothpick either. Our job is to help children change their lives, help their parents, help their teachers, change the lives of these kids. You know what a trajectory is? When you fire a cannon, it goes up and then it falls, right? We don't want the cannon to fall. We don't want the trajectory to end when we're done treating the kid. We want the trajectory like a rocket to continue into outer space. And we do it by delivering services to the extent that the kid needs them, not to the extent that the insurance company wants to fund them. So it's a fundamental collision that we have. It's an adversarial relationship with the insurance companies. No other treatment provider has that relationship. They all want to be friends. Well, I want to be friendly, but I don't want to work for them, and you shouldn't either. So the professionals that we're training here at the Institute are going to be professionals who understand that they may be able to operate their own clinical practice at some point in the future on the same ethical basis that we do. They have that capacity because they're learning about it. That's my goal in leaving these kinds of trainings behind, that you and everybody who succeeds you in this role will be able to embrace an honest and ethical practice that leaves people with more than just a superficial understanding of what their kid needs, but also understands how to get it funded so that they can make sure it gets delivered until the child doesn't need the treatment anymore. That's the mission we have.